The studio lights glared across the sleek, modern set of a primetime talk show. Cameras zoomed, producers whispered in headsets, and the energy of a live broadcast filled the air. On the guest list tonight was none other than Keanu Reeves, a man known not only for his blockbuster films but also for his quiet dignity and deep humanity. Audiences adored him, not because he was flashy or controversial, but because he radiated a rare kind of authenticity that Hollywood often lacked. He was humble, soft-spoken, and rarely entertained drama. Yet, unbeknownst to him, tonight's interview would become one of the most unforgettable moments of his career. Not because of his movies, but because of the clash that was about to unfold between kindness and arrogance, humility and ego, respect and ridicule. The host, a man well known for his sharp tongue and polarizing opinions, had built a career on mockery. He thrived on confrontation, priding himself on pushing guests into uncomfortable corners just to elicit a viral moment. His producers loved it, the network praised it, and his loyal followers expected it. But there was a darker edge to his tactics. He often ridiculed guests under the guise of humor, crossing boundaries with sarcastic remarks, politically loaded jabs, and personal attacks. Some celebrities fought back with fire, others laughed it off nervously, and a few even walked off the stage. Tonight, though, he thought he had found his easiest target in Keanu Reeves, a man too polite, too restrained, too quiet to ever push back, or so he believed. Keanu arrived at the studio early, as he often did for any professional commitment, dressed simply in a black suit, his long hair falling gently past his shoulders. He greeted everyone he met, the camera crew, the assistants, even the janitor, with a warm smile and a handshake. He carried no entourage, no flashy jewelry, and no air of superiority. To him, every person mattered. He settled into the green room quietly, sipping tea and flipping through a book of poetry he had brought with him. Meanwhile, the host was in his dressing room rehearsing lines. Not questions, but barbs, rehearsed insults disguised as jokes that he planned to throw at Keanu. His plan was simple: break the actor's calm, provoke a reaction, and create a headline-worthy viral moment. What he didn't realize was that he was about to provoke something much greater than a soundbite. The studio audience filed in, buzzing with anticipation. Many were fans of Keanu, people who admired his work in The Matrix, John Wick, and countless other films. But more than that, they admired his humility. The way he gave away millions quietly to crew members, the way he rode the subway like an ordinary man, the way he comforted strangers with kind words. They didn't come to see him mocked. They came to see him appreciated. As the host strutted onto the stage with his usual smug grin, he had no idea that the balance of power in that room did not belong to him. It belonged to the man he thought was weak. And when Keanu finally stepped out under those bright lights to thunderous applause, the stage was set for a battle that would end in silence, shock, and the ultimate downfall of arrogance. The applause still echoed through the studio as Keanu Reeves took his seat across from the host. The contrast between the two men was striking. On one side sat Keanu, calm and collected, his posture relaxed, his expression gentle, his very presence radiating humility. On the other side, the host leaned forward with a sly grin, his body language screaming confidence, perhaps overconfidence. He adjusted his tie dramatically and waited for the crowd's cheers to fade before speaking, his voice dripping with rehearsed charm. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, pausing for effect, "please welcome Hollywood's most mysterious man, the legend himself, Keanu Reeves." The audience roared again, but as the applause subsided, there was something in the host's eyes, an almost predatory gleam. He wasn't interested in celebrating Keanu. He wanted a spectacle. The interview started harmless enough. The host asked about Keanu's recent projects, and Keanu answered thoughtfully, always taking time to acknowledge the hard work of his castmates, directors, and crew. Every answer was grounded in gratitude. He praised the stunt teams, the cinematographers, the fans. Never once did he elevate himself above anyone else. This, however, seemed to irritate the host. He thrived on bold statements, controversy, and ego-driven soundbites. And Keanu gave him none of that, so little by little he shifted the tone. His questions grew sharper, more personal, laced with sarcasm. He mocked Keanu's calm nature, calling him Hollywood's monk. He poked fun at his quiet lifestyle, suggesting that Keanu was too boring to be a star in today's drama-fueled entertainment world. The audience gave half-hearted laughs, unsure if they were supposed to find the digs funny. Keanu simply smiled, unshaken, and responded with grace. But the host wasn't satisfied. He turned political. With an air of arrogance, he leaned back in his chair and said, "You know, Keanu, in Hollywood these days, everyone's taking a stand. Everyone's loud about their opinions. Don't you think it's a little cowardly to stay so neutral? Don't you think people expect you to pick a side?" The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. It wasn't just a question, it was a provocation. The host knew that politics was a minefield, and if he could lure Keanu into taking a stance, especially a controversial one, he could spin it into a viral headline. The crowd shifted uneasily, sensing the tension. Keanu, however, remained calm. He looked directly at the host, his voice measured, and said, "I don't believe kindness or compassion should have a side. I believe people deserve respect regardless of where they come from or what they believe." His words drew a soft murmur of approval from the audience. The host smirked, unsatisfied. He leaned forward again, his tone sharpening like a knife. "But isn't that just playing it safe?" he pressed. "You're sitting on the fence while others fight for what matters. You make movies about heroes who stand up for justice, but in real life, you don't even pick a fight." It was a jab not only at Keanu's career but at his character. The crowd grew restless, some even booing lightly at the host's aggression. But Keanu didn't flinch. He clasped his hands gently, tilted his head, and with that calm, unshakable presence he was known for, he said, "Standing up for justice doesn't always mean shouting the loudest or picking fights. Sometimes it means showing kindness when the world expects cruelty. Sometimes it means listening when others only want to speak." The audience erupted in applause, louder than before. The host forced a tight smile, masking his frustration, but his eyes betrayed his annoyance. He had thrown jabs meant to rattle Keanu, yet each one had been met not with anger, but with dignity, and the crowd was clearly on Keanu's side. And yet, the host wasn't ready to stop. For him, this was no longer just an interview, it was a challenge. He wanted to break Keanu's calm. He wanted to corner him into a moment of weakness. But what he didn't realize was that every attempt only revealed more of his own arrogance. Every barb he launched only highlighted Keanu's quiet strength. What was supposed to be a one-sided game of humiliation was slowly turning into something very different. A clash that the host was destined to lose. The tension in the room grew thicker with each passing minute. The audience could feel it. The clash of energies, the arrogance of the host against the steady calm of Keanu Reeves. What had started as a conversation was now a duel, and everyone was waiting to see who would land the decisive blow. The host leaned back in his chair, twirling his pen between his fingers like a weapon. His smirk deepened, his voice turning colder, sharper. He had tried subtle digs, he had tried sarcasm, he had even tried politics, but nothing had cracked Keanu's composure. Now he decided it was time to drop the mask of civility and strike directly. He wasn't going to just question Keanu's choices. He was going to mock his very existence. The host shifted forward abruptly, his tone suddenly louder, cutting through the room. "You know what I don't get, Keanu," he sneered. "You walk around like some kind of saint. You give away money, you take the subway, you act like you're above all the Hollywood nonsense. But let's be honest here. Maybe you're not some enlightened man. Maybe you're just too simple. Maybe you're not smart enough to have real opinions. Maybe that's why you stay quiet." The words hit the air like a thunderclap. Gasps erupted from the audience. Even the camera operators froze. It wasn't a joke. It wasn't a playful jab. It was a direct insult, a cruel attempt to paint Keanu as nothing more than an empty shell, A man unworthy of respect. For a moment silence fell. The audience shifted uncomfortably, their admiration for Keanu now mixing with anger toward the host. People exchanged uneasy glances, waiting for Keanu to respond. The insult was more than unfair. It was deeply personal. Everyone in that room knew Keanu's story. They knew the tragedies he had endured. The loss of loved ones, the battles with grief, the years of quiet suffering hidden behind his gentle smile. They knew that his humility was not a mask for ignorance, but a conscious choice born from pain, empathy, and hard-earned wisdom. To suggest that his kindness came from stupidity was not only offensive, it was heartless. The crowd waited with bated breath, their loyalty silently shifting entirely to Keanu, willing him to respond. Keanu remained still, his hands folded gently in his lap. His eyes, however, told a different story. They narrowed just slightly, not with anger, but with clarity. This was the moment he had chosen not to seek, but one he could no longer avoid. He leaned forward slightly, his calm voice cutting through the silence. "You think kindness is weakness," he said slowly, every word deliberate. "But I've lived long enough to know that cruelty is easy. Anyone can mock, anyone can tear down. Takes strength to build, takes strength to endure. It takes strength to care when the world tells you not to." His words flowed not like a rebuttal, but like a truth that had been waiting to be spoken. The studio was electrified. The audience erupted into cheers, many even rising to their feet, clapping and shouting in support. The host tried to laugh it off, forcing a grin, but his mask was cracking. For the first time, the power balance on his stage had shifted. He had crossed the line with cruelty, and instead of crumbling, Keanu had risen above it, exposing the emptiness of the host's words. This wasn't just an interview anymore, it was a lesson. And the teacher was the man the host had called too simple. The host's smirk faltered as the cheers thundered through the studio. For years, he had thrived on tearing people down, always managing to twist the narrative in his favor. But now, as the camera zoomed in, the world was watching a very different dynamic unfold. Keanu Reeves, quiet, gentle, unassuming Keanu, was no longer just the guest. He was the voice of reason, the embodiment of strength through humility, and every eye in the room was locked on him. The host shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his forced grin looking more like a grimace. He tried to regain control. Well, he said with a laugh that sounded brittle. "That's a nice little speech. But come on, Keanu, this is Hollywood. People don't respect kindness here. They respect power, influence, controversy. Don't you think your whole act of being the nice guy is just outdated?" Keanu let the words hang in the air. He didn't rush. He didn't stumble over rebuttals or raise his voice. Instead, he leaned back slightly, his eyes steady, his voice low but commanding. "If being kind is outdated," he said softly, "then maybe it's the world that needs to catch up." The audience erupted again, applause echoing like waves across the studio. He paused, then continued, his tone calm yet piercing. "You say people respect power, but what kind of power are we talking about? The power to mock someone on television, the power to make people laugh at cruelty. That's not strength. That's insecurity wearing a suit." His words struck deep, and the host visibly stiffened. The audience roared, clapping, some even whistling. This wasn't just a comeback. It was a dismantling, delivered with surgical precision, without a hint of malice, but with undeniable truth. The host tried to interrupt, but Keanu pressed on, his voice unwavering. "You asked why I don't pick fights. It's because I've seen enough of life to know where fights lead. I've buried too many people I love to waste my time proving I'm stronger than someone else. My strength is in not needing to shout, not needing to step on others just to feel tall." His voice grew steadier, firmer, yet never angry. "And if the world thinks that makes me simple, so be it. I'd rather be simple and kind than clever and cruel." The audience erupted into a standing ovation. Even those who had sat in silence before now rose to their feet. clapping, cheering, shouting Keanu's name. The roar was so loud the camera shook, and the host sat frozen, his face pale, his smirk gone. What made the moment unforgettable was not just what Keanu said, but how he said it. There was no bitterness, no desire to humiliate. He spoke like a man who had lived through darkness and chosen light, like someone who had nothing to prove yet everything to teach. It wasn't just a clapback, it was a mirror, forcing the host and everyone watching to confront the truth. The host, who had built his reputation on humiliating others, was suddenly exposed. His arrogance looked small, his cruelty pathetic. When placed beside Keanu's quiet, unshakable dignity, the contrast was undeniable, and the audience wasn't just entertained, they were moved. The cameras caught it all. The standing ovation, the host's trembling hands, the look of calm resolve on Keanu's face. Social media would soon explode with clips of this very moment. Headlines would label it, "The Day Keanu Reeves Silenced Cruelty." Memes, quotes, and reactions would spread across platforms, turning this live confrontation into a cultural flashpoint. But in that studio, in that exact moment, none of that mattered. What mattered was the truth spoken plainly, the arrogance dismantled gracefully, and the undeniable sense that the balance had shifted forever. Keanu Reeves had not raised his voice, yet he had destroyed the host with words sharper than any insult, because they were rooted in compassion, and compassion is a power no arrogance can withstand. For a long, charged moment, the studio was filled with nothing but the roar of applause. It was not the polite kind of clapping that fills gaps during a live show. It was raw, thunderous, unstoppable. People were standing on their feet, some clapping so hard their hands turned red, others shouting words of encouragement. "That's right, Keanu," one voice shouted from the back. Another yelled, "Tell him the truth." The cameras tried to capture the host's face, but he sat frozen, blinking rapidly as if the spotlight had suddenly become unbearable. He attempted to raise his hand to quiet the crowd, but the gesture was weak, almost invisible compared to the force of the audience's energy. For the first time in his career, he was not in control of his stage. The host leaned into his microphone, forcing out a laugh, but it cracked, hollow and nervous. "Well, folks," he said, his voice strained, "I guess the monk speaks." The attempt at humor fell flat. Not a single laugh echoed back to him. The silence that followed was worse than the boos he sometimes provoked. It was a rejection, a void that told him clearly. The audience was no longer with him. They were with Keanu. The host shifted in his seat. His legs crossed and uncrossed nervously, his practiced confidence collapsing under the weight of the moment. He had spent years mocking others and twisting narratives, but he could not twist this one. The truth was too obvious, too visible. Keanu had spoken with dignity, and the world had seen it. Meanwhile, Keanu remained composed. He did not gloat, he did not smirk, and he did not press his advantage. Instead, he simply smiled softly and nodded at the crowd, almost embarrassed by their overwhelming reaction. He raised his hand gently as if to calm them, and the room slowly quieted, though the energy still crackled in the air. He then turned back to the host, his voice even and calm. "It's not about me," he said quietly, but with the clarity of a bell. "It's about how we treat each other. If we can't find respect in a conversation, then what hope do we have outside of it?" His words resonated like an echo through the studio, and this time even those working behind the cameras nodded in agreement. The host's shoulders slumped. He had wanted a fight, but what he got instead was a reflection of his own cruelty, held up for the world to see. As the interview wound down, the producers, sensing the storm, quickly cut to a commercial break, but the damage was already done. The audience's murmurs during the pause filled the room, people whispering to each other about what they had just witnessed. Some shook their heads in disbelief at the host's cruelty. Others expressed admiration for Keanu's restraint. When the cameras returned, the host tried to steer the conversation back to safer ground, asking mechanical questions about Keanu's latest film, but the spark was gone. His words sounded empty, his voice strained. The audience no longer engaged with him. Their applause was directed only at Keanu. The host had lost his grip not just on the interview, but on the respect of the very people who had come to see his show. Backstage, producers exchanged nervous glances. They had counted on the host to control the narrative, to deliver another viral clash. Instead, the moment had gone viral for all the wrong reasons. Phones were already buzzing, tweets already flying, and clips already being uploaded online. Everyone knew it. This was more than just a bad segment. This was a turning point. A career built on arrogance and mockery had cracked live on air. And the man who had been underestimated, who had been called too simple, had dismantled it with nothing but calm truth. In the studio, the air felt different now, charged with the sense that they had all witnessed something unforgettable. The host sat in silence, his smirk gone, while Keanu, humble as always, thanked the audience with a quiet bow of his head. When the cameras stopped rolling, the atmosphere inside the studio remained charged. The audience was still buzzing, some lingering in their seats just to catch another glimpse of Keanu. People spoke in hushed, excited tones, replaying the moment when he had silenced cruelty with compassion. Even the crew, who had long since grown used to the host's sharp tongue, seemed shaken. The host himself retreated quickly backstage, his head down, avoiding eye contact. For once, he did not strut with his usual arrogance. He knew it. Everyone knew it. His downfall had not come from a scandal dug up by tabloids or from a rival's ambition. It had come from the truth, spoken by a man he had underestimated. Within hours, clips of the confrontation flooded social media. The internet exploded with hashtags like #Keanu the Legend and #Kindness is Strength. Millions watched the video of Keanu calmly dismantling the host's arrogance, and comments poured in by the thousands. This is how you destroy someone without even raising your voice. Keanu Reeves just taught the world a lesson in humility. That host's career is over. The moment resonated far beyond Hollywood. It touched ordinary people, teachers, parents, students, workers, anyone who had ever been mocked, belittled, or dismissed. They saw in Keanu not just a movie star, but a reminder that kindness was not weakness, and that dignity could be the sharpest weapon of all. The network executives, meanwhile, were in crisis mode. Advertisers began pulling back, fans threatened to boycott, and the host's reputation crumbled faster than anyone could have predicted. By the end of the week, the announcement was official. The host had been removed from the show. The statement was brief and clinical, citing a commitment to respectful dialogue, but everyone knew the truth. He had been fired because he crossed a line, and he had been exposed on live television in front of millions. His arrogance had been his weapon for years, but in the face of Keanu's composure, it had turned into his downfall. And what of Keanu? When asked about the viral moment, he gave no interviews, no gloating remarks, no victory lap. He simply went on with his life, filming, giving to charity, speaking gently to fans he met on the street. When pressed by a reporter who caught him leaving a restaurant, he gave a small smile and said, "It wasn't about winning. It was about reminding people that kindness matters." That was all. No elaboration, no self-promotion. Just the same quiet dignity that had carried him through years of hardship and triumph alike. In his silence, he spoke louder than any headline could. In the months that followed, the clip became legendary. Not just as a viral moment, but as a cultural touchstone. Universities played it in lectures about communication and ethics. Motivational speakers quoted it in their talks. People who had once felt powerless replayed it to remind themselves that dignity could defeat cruelty. And in every retelling, the lesson remained clear. Keanu Reeves did not destroy the host with anger or insults. He destroyed him with truth, compassion, and humility. That was his legacy, the legacy of a man who had endured loss, who had walked through fire, and who had emerged not hardened, but softened, refusing to let the world take away his humanity. In the end, the host was forgotten, but Keanu's example lived on, a timeless reminder that real power lies not in arrogance, but in kindness.